What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we have a great episode outlined for you today. Ian Garry came out and said some things on Ariel Helwani since the announcement of him versus Islam Makhachev. Diego Lopes wants to move to 155. We'll talk about, is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? And if he does move up, who he should potentially fight. Josh Hokit has some things to say about Alex Pereira, gave him some praise and then criticized him a little bit. We'll get into that and if that's the next fight to be made. And of course, we have to talk about the AI rankings now. There were some big winners and some big losers and some pretty massive names taken out of the rankings. And unfortunately today, guys, we have to end the conversation talking about some of the troubles that Dustin Poirier is facing in his retirement. And as a big fan of the Diamond, it pains me. But every topic we talk about will be down below in the timestamps. So if there's a particular thing you want to know about, you'll know where to find it. But Nick, I think the biggest news of the last 2 weeks, really since Freedom 250, has been the announcement of Garry versus Makhachev. That's the biggest fight announcement since McGregor-Holloway was announced. So I think let's start there.
Okay.
Ian Garry, and it's so funny because literally I have everything thought through and sort of compartmentalized in my head of like, how do I want to attack this episode? What do I want to talk about? And naturally, you always check social media right before you sit down to record just to make sure nothing crazy has changed. And what did I see? Ian Garry has now signed with Matchroom. So he's with Eddie Hearn now. So
this is news to me.
Breaking news. I literally, as of the last 10 minutes, I just checked it and it seems like all the media outlets are reporting it now. So I think there's some validity to it. So that adds a layer of complexity to things. Now, this fight is already booked, so I assume if Ian becomes the champion, or regardless of what happens, Eddie will now be negotiating, Eddie Hearn that is, for Ian Garry moving forward. But let's talk about what he said on Ariel specifically, because there was a couple of things that stuck out to me. One, he spoke in very high regard about Islam, and he said, I can't think of a better person to win the belt off of than the guy who's the number one pound for pound fighter in the entire organization right now, in the division that's the most stacked in the organization right now, and a guy that's being discussed as being a potential GOAT. And that's the guy I want to prove that my worth. I want to take the belt off of the absolute best.
Right.
The other thing that he said was, look, I was promised this fight back in January. Hunter Campbell told me, you're the next in line. And Islam was the one that kept saying, no, no, no. He said we had a date. I think it was the Miami card. Right. And then it was Newark, New Jersey. And then, of course, he's like, I understood that they tried to make Ilya versus Islam. It's hard to not do number 2 versus number 1 pound for pound in the biggest event that the sport has put on, which was the White House card. So he's like, I even kind of understood that. But Hunter Campbell and Mick Maynard have made good on their promise to me, which is that after I beat Bilal Muhammad, that I was next in line. And he's like, all the drama and all the BS is past me now. I have my date. And Islam finally said yes. He said he learned how to say yes, was what how Ian Garry phrased it. So thoughts on the interview and kind of the candid nature of what Ian had to say?
Yeah, I think Ian did a great job on the interview, and he's so right about taking the belt from the pound for pound number 1. If he's able to go steal Islam's belt, I mean, does that make him the pound for pound number 1 fighter in the world? He's certainly got a good case there. And I also get how he's such a fan of the sport and keeps his finger on the pulse, where like he wasn't going to throw a tantrum if Ilya did somehow beat Justin Gaethje and then get his opportunity against Islam. It made sense when you have two guys so close in weight. They're, all the beef and the history that Islam and Ilya had. It would have made sense. I would have felt bad for Ian, but I also understand that like he's done more than enough to get a title shot. So if he had to sit around and wait even longer, though he wants to be active, that would have been his best choice. But the UFC got everything settled and figured out, especially after Justin at 250. So Ian versus Islam is the biggest fight that we've got on the docket that's for a world title. That is such a fun fight. And I think a lot of people, even though we see Islam as the favorite, as this unstoppable force this far into his UFC career, people are predicting that he will become the GOAT with just a few more wins at 170. I think he's got a real tough challenge in front of him in Ian Garry. And one thing that stuck out to me was Ian's confidence, right? We can always read body language and sort of see how somebody actually feels about the fight that they've drawn into based off an interview like that, especially a long one where you can sit with them for 30, 45 minutes and really get to feel it. He's confident he's going to beat Islam Makhachev. He's confident that once he does get the belt, not only is he going to be a better champion, he's going to be a more active champion. He said, look, Islam is going to fight one time this year, and then we know he's not going to fight again in 2026. He's also not going to fight in the early part of 2027. So we're talking about him fighting for the second time after me
in July of 27.
In July of 27, yeah, that's so far away. He's like, I'm going to be an active champion. I want to fight. There's tons of good rematches and great opponents for me once I become the champion. So not that he's looking over Islam. I think that it's safe to say that Ian Garry is a very respect-heavy guy, and he will never bash somebody who has achieved so much in the sport like Islam Makhachev has. So I think that even though he's confident, he's not saying like, oh, I'm going to go steamroll the pound-for-pound number one guy in the world. He's going to go out there and fight to the best of his abilities. Technically, I can't wait to get into how this fight's going to look because I think he's got to manage range to the best of his abilities. He's going to have to be perfect for 25 minutes because he doesn't have that single-shot KO power that a Morales or a Prates has. And Islam Makhachev is very good at solving problems in front of him. And if you've got to be perfect for 25 minutes in a cage, Islam Makhachev's the last guy you want to have to do that against. So I think this fight's going to wind up being very high level, very fun to see. And I'm just happy that Ian Garry, even though, he has that one loss to Shavkat, aside from that, he's looked damn perfect out there in the UFC in every fight he's in. And love him or hate him or make fun of him, poke fun, because there's obviously a lot of things you can make fun of. The dude can fight. He's confident. He's got the skills, and I think Islam Makhachev is going to have his hands full, at least in the early parts of this fight with Ian Garry.
Yeah, and he's the rightful guy. He beat Carlos Prates on short notice, and then he beat Bilal Muhammad. And I know Bilal has not, looked great since losing the belt, but at the time, he was a very formidable former champion.
And the Carlos Prates win is aging like a fine wine at this point.
Isn't it ever? And it's so funny, Islam Makhachev was asked, and Ariel actually asked Ian kind of about, Islam said basically this fight, because I guess it was an interview that happened in Russian and it was translated to English, but he was asked, is this the next rendition, in your opinion, of Conor versus Khabib? There's a lot of comparison drawn. Obviously, Islam is Khabib's direct pupil, and as far as Conor and Ian Garry are concerned, they're fellow countrymen, they're both Irish, and Islam said, no, this is the AliExpress version of Khabib versus Conor. Now, for those of us in the United States, we would tend to use the reference of Wish. We would say this is the Wish Conor versus Khabib,
or Temu.
Exactly.
But the Temu. Alibaba AliExpress also works for sure.
That works too.
Yeah.
And it's when I was watching Ian Garry, the one thing that kind of stood out to me was, this kid is very likable, right? A lot of people make fun of him because of the stuff with his wife and what has happened outside of the cage. But there is a real likable nature to Ian Machado Garry. And
I agree.
I think that the problem with Ian Garry is that he is a fellow countryman of Conor McGregor, and thus he is always compared to Conor. Because if you listen to him, like let's say he was from England, or he was from Canada, or he was from the United States, another English-speaking country that doesn't happen to have the biggest star that the sport has ever seen, you would look at him and say, this is a young man who's very sharp-looking, got great skills, 28 years old, contending for a belt.
Good on the microphone.
Good on the microphone. He speaks well. He's compelling. But the problem is, he's got that Irish accent. And everybody's going to, just like Islam said, this is the AliExpress version of Conor versus Khabib. It's Dagestan versus Ireland. He'll never really be able to escape that. And I think in some unfair way, Ian Machado Garry is always going to be compared with Conor McGregor. And newsflash, no one, at least nobody competing right now, will ever touch the numbers that Conor touched.
Right.
I mean, look at Conor coming back now, and his numbers are through the roof already, 6 years removed from his last fight. So I think Ian Machado Garry is almost a victim of where he's from in a weird way, because when I look at an interview like I just saw him do on Ariel, I think to myself, this kid has all the makings of an absolute star.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, he's used a couple of Conor's famous lines whenever he's gotten his opportunity in front of a microphone.
Hasn't quite copied him to the level that Ilya has. He hasn't gotten the same tattoos yet. But,
no, he doesn't have near the tattoos. I don't like the tattoos, just the single marks of lines and words and stuff.
It's his deal,
It's
though.
his thing, and I'll let him run with it. But he's right about Ian Garry, Islam Makhachev kind of being the 2.0. And I'm not going to call it the Temu or the Wish are the AliExpress version of Conor versus Khabib. It feels more to me like chapter 2 of Dagestan versus Ireland.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun because who would have thought those two parts of the world would be feuding this way? And of course, mixed martial arts and mostly Conor and Khabib's feud is what lit the fuse there. And now there has become like this rivalry within our sport between those two places. And who remembers that time years ago when I think Conor McGregor was disrespecting Khabib to some level, and Khamzat Chimaev, who's not even from Dagestan but in that region, was like going to get on a plane and fly straight to Ireland to address the situation.
I think he was like in the process of doing that.
Yeah, so, exactly. So I obviously like there's a real like turf battle going on, and I think that instead of calling it like a Temu version, I think it's good to just call it chapter 2. And it's really cool to see that both areas of the world are able to excel and get to the highest point of the sport and give us great title fights. Like, I honestly think that, and I have to go back and look, but I don't think Khabib was pound for pound number 1 when Conor fought him. So this is actually even more of a feat for Ian Garry to get through, because while we all know Khabib, retired undefeated, incredible fighter, some people's GOATs, Islam Makhachev's GOAT. I mean, obviously he's got a say in the thing, but obviously his opinion is also slightly biased. But Ian Garry is going to have his hands full because he is truly dealing with the pound-for-pound number 1 fighter in the world. A lot of people thought Ilia Topuria could have taken that spot, but he certainly is no longer in the running for number 1 pound-for-pound. And everybody in our industry can officially say, right now in 2026, Islam Makhachev is the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. And is Ian Garry the guy to beat him? Is he the one to steal that spot? I don't know, but I do think that given the 170 division, and it's the most stacked division the world's ever seen, like welterweight is hotter than it's ever been. And he was even, Ian Garry was asked about the division, and he's like, look at what we've got right now. It's insane. He even brought up a couple of the names that I've been bringing up in recent times. Obviously, you got your Prates, you've got your Morales. He said Sean Brady, who's a great fighter. Obviously, Kamaru was there, but he's now gone. He's gone to 185. I can't wait for his return with DDP. But then he said Gabriel Bonfim.
Yeah.
Great fighter, great record. Euros Medic on his way up. Amazov coming up. Like that was like 7 people I just rattled off, and he said the same name. So 170's humming, and if he can take a jump and steal the throne, steal that spot as king of 170 from Islam Makhachev, we're talking about a generational talent.
What you just said there is why I really like Ian Garry, because I love somebody who's a student of the sport that they participate in. Nothing irritates me more than when fighters are asked, like, who do you want next? And they're like, you know, man, like, I don't even really watch fights. When
I'd have to go look at the rankings in my division.
I don't know who who's there in my division, but like,
what is that?
You know, why are you not studying your, like, if you ask an NBA player, you know, somebody who plays for, you know, pick a team, the Houston Rockets. We're in Houston. You know, what do you think about this player from the Knicks who just won the NBA Finals? They'll be like, oh, he's fantastic. He's really good here. I think we can exploit him there.
He's got a great jumper, but if I get in front of him and do X, Y, and Z, we might be able to stop him.
This guy off the bench, you know, when he's playing with him, there's this chemistry. Like, fighters like put on this facade sometimes, and maybe it's not a facade, maybe it's real. Maybe some of them really don't watch the sport outside of them participating, but it's hard to get behind a guy like that. The reason that I'm behind Ian Garry, I'm not saying that I think he's going to beat Islam or that I even want him to beat Islam, but if he were to become the champion, the reason that I could get behind him is because he's a student of the game. He respects the rankings. He said Prates obviously has done enough. He deserves his rematch. I would love an opportunity to beat Shavkat, but he needs to come back and win a few fights. He gave love to Bonfim, you know, Amosov. And so he knows how the pecking order stands. And he's saying, look, I'm not going to be your once-a-year champion that defends his belt only one time in a calendar year like Makhachev has been. I'm going to defend multiple times. I'm going to fight true number 1 contenders, and I'm going to make it really damn exciting while I'm doing it. And it's very hard not to get behind a guy who's speaking that way, right?
Yeah, it's refreshing, and it's a breath of fresh air, right?
Yeah.
Because half the time you have people that go, I don't care who I fight, just tell the UFC to call me, and then I'll take it. And my rant that I've said many times on this podcast is it drives me crazy when a fighter gets asked a question after a win. A win in the UFC is one of the biggest moments in a UFC fighter's, not just career, but their life. You are now standing there with Joe Rogan or Michael Bisping or Daniel Cormier, and the last thing they ask you before you get off of the screen and you're no longer seen for another 3 to 6 months is, who do you want to fight next? And I understand it's not a job for the fighter to matchmake, but when they ask you that question, they want a little bit of assistance in making your next match. And also they want you to try to get the crowd interested in what you have next. Because if you don't have plans for what you're going to do for your next fight, some job security, then how are the fans going to get excited for what you have next? And unfortunately for the guys that come out and they say, it doesn't matter who I fight, just send me somebody, I'm willing to fight anybody in the rankings, whatever it is they decide to come out with. Usually the UFC is going to go, okay, put them on the back burner. We'll look for somebody in a few weeks or a few months whenever they're healed up and ready to come back. But if you grab that microphone, and Ian Garry has done it several times, and say, I want this person, you've done the matchmaking for them. Now the people online will do the job for you. You say the name, the people online will go, oh my gosh, think about this fight. It would be fun. It's also a way that, again, UFC fighters are not people that want to cherry pick their way to the top of the division. But if there is stylistic matchups that favor you in your division, you should know that. And if there's an ability to pick the person that you want to fight against, even though all fighters think they can beat everybody in the world and everybody's goal to become champion means anybody, anywhere, anytime, there are still ways where you can navigate your own career and at least have a grip on the vehicle that is your career. Because if you let the UFC determine what all your fights are going to be, you have no say. But if you say, you knock somebody out and you go, look, I've got the perfect next opponent, it's so-and-so, and make sure it lines up, right? Make sure they aren't already booked with somebody else, but make sure that it makes some sense for the UFC to want to make it. And then if you got to go fabricate a little bit of a beef, it doesn't have to be as far as like a Conor and Khabib went, but you can go fabricate a little bit of a beef and get online and tweet at them, and they'll tweet back at you. And before you know it, you got a fight. And sometimes that can wind up being a favorable matchup. So that's my rant for matchmaking, because shameless plug, Matchmaker Monday has been a lot of fun, but I feel like it would be even easier for me and even easier for the matchmakers in the UFC if every time somebody got a microphone after a win, they called somebody out, because now you actually do get to play a role in the sport that gives you the least amount of control in any sport. Fighters don't really have much say in anything. They don't have much say in the gloves, as we were talking about with the Onyx gloves. They don't have much say in the pay. They don't have much say as they don't have a union, none of that stuff. But they always ask you who you want to fight next, and it just pains me when nobody can ever come up with a name. So I have to give credit to guys who are students of the sport, fans of the sport, and willing to make their own calls, and Ian Garry has done that.
Yeah, one thing, and I think that's actually a perfect segue into Josh Hokit, Alex Pereira, because what are the chances that those two fight
He's certainly
next?
been calling for shots.
But one more thing Ian said that I want to talk about before we move into the next topic is quick break in the action, guys, to thank today's sponsor, Kalshi, the predictions markets where you can trade on real-world events, including MMA fights. And what Nick and I love most about Kalshi is that the lines move based on what you guys, the fans and the experts, think is going to happen, and they're not affected by online bookies. And as a special thank you to the Barnhill Brothers listeners, Kalshi is giving you $20 to predict with once you download the app, use the promo code Barnhill, and deposit $20 of your own. So if you think you know MMA ball, stop talking about it and put a little skin in the game with Kalshi. Thanks so much to them for being today's sponsor. Back to the video. He said that Michael Morales should move to 185. He said, look, there's too much opposition here at 170. I've got unfinished business with Rakhmonov. Prates has done enough to warrant his rematch. Who knows if him and Islam have a close fight? There's potentially a rematch there. And he said, look, you're a young, very sizable guy with some talent. Like, he gave him a little bit of respect, but kind of cut him at the same time. And he was like, if I were you, I would move to 185. There's no big stars in that division. That's where you should go. Now, do you take that as that's a matchup that Ian sees that he doesn't want to deal with? Or do you think that he's truly doing a solid to Morales, who told him to SUCK it on a video in a response to that? Where do you land on that one? Yeah,
so obviously Ian Garry does seem like a legitimately nice person, and I would assume that he wants the best for the guys that are his colleagues and friends in the sport. And I don't know if him and Morales are friends, but it's one of two things. Either he's like, I like this guy and I think that he's going to be cutting too much weight. Also, there's a bit of a logjam, so maybe move him up because Prates is a star. Islam Makhachev isn't going to go away easy, and I don't think that an immediate rematch isn't something that Islam Makhachev could get if he is somehow beaten by Ian Garry. But it does sort of look like, hey, dude, I don't want to have to deal with you. You're a massive individual. Go up to 185. It's wide open. It's open season up there. Go over there and have some fun. But I think Morales is right to say, you know what? I think you're just trying to duck me. You don't want to fight me because you know I'm the toughest matchup in the division, which could wind up being the case. I'm hoping that we can somehow get Prates to change his mind on not fighting for the rest of this year, and we can get Morales versus Prates in August. I know time is a little bit of the essence at this point, but that would be such a fun fight and would give us our clear number one contender at 170.
Well, it'd give you the backup on 330 too. That would satisfy as a backup,
and that's massive. Yeah,
you know, if something were to happen to Ian, hopefully not, but like
or Islam,
you could. Yeah, but maybe they shelf it if something happens to Islam. But
true.
Let's move into the Hokit stuff now. So. Okay. Hokit's also been doing the media tour, says a lot of things on these interviews. Most of them are not things that we touch on this channel. We talk fighting on this channel, and it will remain as such.
But he was pretty normal and even keel for that Ariel Helwani podcast.
Yeah.
And now I'm at this point with Josh Hokit where I want to see the theatrics. Like, he's gotten me conditioned to enjoying the wild stuff that he says. Every time we see Josh Hokit's name pop up, you're like, okay, here's a viral moment.
Yeah.
This is going to be one of the biggest things that's happening in our sport for the week. And obviously, he gave us that with the Ariel Helwani interview, but he wasn't being this over-the-top character. It wasn't Down Vato. It wasn't the Incredible Hulk. It was just Josh.
It was Josh Hokit. He was himself. And so, and you know, one of the things I've kind of come to love about Josh is that he actually, when he is himself, is a very smart guy, and he knows the fight game. And he understands how to manipulate and move himself through this fighting experience that he's having right now. Alex Pereira still, even after the Cyril Gane loss, is one of the biggest names that you can draw in the sport.
Right.
You know, he's maybe top 5. Like if you get, oh man, I just got offered to fight this guy, that's a big night. It's not red panty night. There's only one red panty night, and that's Conor McGregor. Max Holloway's got the biggest draw in the sport. But if Josh Hokit were to draw into Alex Pereira, that would be massive for his career.
Sure.
Now, the opening odds on that actually favor Hokit. It's pretty close, but I think when you look at Hokit's speed and his ability to grapple, I can see why people are predicting that Hokit may actually have an advantage over Pereira.
Yeah.
But the main thing with the conversation today that I kind of want to touch on is more about what Alex said and not so much what Josh said, which is that he's actually afraid to go back to fighting if they're not going to do something that addresses the back of the head shots, because he fears that, you know, if that happens to him again, if he gets his rematch with Cyril, or if Josh Hokit or whoever he draws into next is able to just rip off on the back of his head, that's going to be a problem and potentially, you know, at his age, almost 40 years old, something that could cause problems for him after his fighting career. Now, I have been a little bit critical of Alex. I don't think he's handled this loss extremely well. I 100% full stop. Cyril Gane needs to stop cheating in fights.
For sure.
There's compilations on YouTube that are just egregious of Cyril Gane poking people in the eyes, and it's almost every fight, kicking people in the nuts, multiple fights, back of the head shots, it's not just a one-off. Cyril Gane is a bit of a dirty fighter.
For sure.
And so I understand Alex's pain point there, but you know, to say that he got knocked down with a lucky jab,
right,
that bothered me. To say that, you know, the back of the headshots are what ended the fight, that bothered me.
Right.
To say that he's afraid to come back to fighting,
that concerns
I don't
me.
believe it's true.
Yeah.
That but Alex Pereira's not afraid of anybody. He's certainly not afraid of Josh Hokit. He's not afraid of Cyril Gane. So I think that I guess the word milking it. He's juicing this lemon for as much as he can squeeze out of it, but I don't really think it's changing the public's opinion much on the outcome. I don't think that I think that we all, if we're honest with ourselves, we don't look at those elbows and say, yeah, that's what ended the fight. It was supreme striking, of Cyril Gane, quickness, timing, accuracy, and hard shots that ended the fight.
Yeah, and Alex Pereira has every right to be upset about what happened with the Cyril Gane fight. Like, I don't say that Cyril Gane won that fight because he illegally striked Alex to the back of the head. But I also feel like Alex Pereira should just accept the loss. Obviously, he's not going to appeal it. He's come out and said that they're not going to appeal the loss. They're going to move on. And the best thing he can do is get back on the horse. Let's not worry about being afraid to fight again. Let's not worry about a ref's competency. Herb Dean has been criticized many, many times over the years, and he still has a job with the UFC. So one more fight isn't really going to change anything, and Alex doesn't need to die on that hill.
And he's never going to ref an Alex fight again. With all this drama, there's no way that the UFC or the commission draws those two together. They're going to put Mark Goddard in there with Alex next. He's going to get his wish. as far as he's concerned, Herb's retired.
Right.
You're never going to have to deal with him in the octagon again. Some other poor sap is going to get elbowed in the back of the head at Herb's expense because, that's what Alex thinks. But yeah, Alex is never going to have to deal with Herb again.
Yeah, and I think that, if Alex Pereira can just get back on the horse and get back into competition, don't forget he's one win away from getting another triple champ opportunity.
Yeah.
Let's not mistake it. Like Alex Pereira's relevancy doesn't just fall away into obscurity now that he lost to Cyril Gane in a world title fight on the biggest card of all time. He is one fight away. And by the way, that could very well be against Josh Hokit, who is the fastest rising star in this sport right now, getting bigger favors than almost anybody in the UFC. I mean, who else can say that in a matter of 6 or 8 weeks and a quick phone call with the president to get Derek Lewis booked got him a fight on the White House lawn? That's one of those things there. Josh Hokit is a meaningful character at heavyweight. And what a difference a day makes that Josh Hokit is now the favorite over Alex Pereira. Obviously, if the fight would have gone differently, nobody would be predicting that, and people would be saying that Alex is the heavy favorite there. But there should be a real chip on Alex's shoulder and say, look, everybody's doubting me now. Everybody's coming out against me. I got illegally, hit to the back of the head, and I didn't like that. But the best thing I'm going to do right now moving forward is make sure I don't put myself in a compromising position again. Obviously, if I see somebody poking towards my face, I'm going to, hopefully the ref pays attention and that doesn't result in an eye poke. If somebody's kicking low to the inside of the thigh and it winds up hitting me in the cup, either he can do the Jamal Hill or he can take his 5 minutes. But, basically just don't get hit by a lucky jab again and get out there and do what you do best, which is knock people out. And that's why I find this fight with Josh Hokit very interesting, because Josh Hokit came out and said, Alex Pereira is an incredible fighter. He's one of the best in the world. He's one of the most accomplished in the world, period, end of story. But I feel like he's almost been...
his career has been curated, is basically, for lack of a better word, what he said.
You took the words out of my mouth. It's not like the UFC is hand selecting. And let's not make a mistake. Like, I'm not saying that Alex Pereira's had an easy road in the UFC at all, but it has been a striking heavy load in the UFC. Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill, Cyril Gane.
Yeah.
Everybody that I just named is significantly more of a striker than they are a grappler. And while Alex Pereira had to get in the cage with these great strikers and still beat them, he was able to do all that, but he hasn't fought a wrestler to the pedigree and the level as Josh Hokit. He also maybe hasn't fought an athlete, aside from Cyril Gane, to the level of Josh Hokit. So I think that's why the odds are starting to sway. People realize that Josh Hokit isn't this crazy guy that's willing to entertain above everything else. Like
he is that, but he's a damn good fighter as well. That's the biggest thing about Josh.
Right, and he was willing to entertain against Curtis Blades. That's what made him famous. But he also showed a lot of, strategy and high fight IQ against Derek Lewis. He goes, I can't go do the same thing I did with Curtis against Derek Lewis. I need to get in there, use my speed, use my agility, tire the big man out, and then start to use a little bit of grappling. And ultimately, once I feel he's tired and exhausted and flat-footed, then I can start to put my hands together and get the knockout that I'm looking for. So I think Josh Hokit is making some serious waves. And even though there's a couple guys ranked higher than him, like Volkov and Pavlovich, I don't want to see Alex Pereira fight either of them. I'd rather see him fight Josh Hokit, and the winner of that fight the winner of Tom versus Cyril. Now, what happens with Tom Aspinall, given the Eddie Hearn being inserted into the negotiations with the UFC and Tom and everything, that's up in the air.
Yeah.
But at this point, Alex Pereira versus Josh Hokit would set up perfectly for a number one contendership, or if Tom Aspinall winds up not fighting and not defending his belt and they strip him, now we can pull one of those two guys in for either a rematch with Cyril Gane or Josh Hokit, a very quick rise in the UFC's heavyweight division to fight for a world title against Cyril Gane.
Yeah, very possible. So, the UFC is going to do one of two things with Tom, and they're going to do it quick, because Eddie Hearn came back and said, look, Tom Aspinall is ready. He's healed. He's prepared. He's in training camp. And we are ready to talk numbers, and we're ready to talk dates. And so that is going to go one of two ways. And I kind of unfortunately have an inkling as to which way it's going to go.
Right.
Because Eddie Hearn's going to ask for a date that the UFC probably doesn't love, but the date may not be the biggest issue. The number is going to be the biggest issue.
Yep.
He's going to ask for an astronomical amount of money for Tom Aspinall's return. And him and the UFC are either going to come to an agreement very quickly, or they're not. But one thing the UFC is not going to do, especially with the John Jones saga and the eye poke saga and now the Tom Aspinall, Eddie Hearn drama, they are not going to just allow a sitting champion to sit out for an extended period of time after he's healed from the eye poke.
Right.
He deserved the time off because Cyril Gane, again, cheated. We're talking again, unfortunately, about Cyril Gane cheating.
Yep.
Cyril Gane cheated and caused him to be sidelined. Now he's ready. Eddie Hearn has said it himself. He's ready. So now we know that the eye poke stuff is behind him.
Right.
And the UFC is not going to carry this on more than, I think, 30 days as far as the negotiation is concerned between Tom Aspinall and the UFC.
We may see a Dana White Instagram live where he's like, all right, the heavyweight belt is now vacant.
Or just put it on Cyril. I mean, think about how Tom won the belt.
True.
Tom was the interim champion. And then on, I don't know if it was Instagram live, something like that, Dana White made Tom Aspinall the undisputed champion and John Jones was no more. And so the precedent has already been set there. They will do that again. Now, will they make Cyril undisputed because of the problems they've had with Cyril? Maybe not. Maybe they just say, look, Cyril's going to remain the interim, and then we're going to put an undisputed belt on the line, and maybe you do Hokit versus Pereira in the meantime. But the point there that I'm trying to make is I don't think that the UFC is going to allow Eddie Hearn to pull them into a long, drawn-out negotiation. They're either going to come to terms quickly or they're not, in which case Josh Hokit and Alex will fight, and the winner will fight Cyril. Or you have a four-man tournament where it's, Tom versus Cyril. Whoever wins that's going to hold the undisputed, and then their first title challenger will be the winner of Josh versus Alex. That's what I'm predicting the landscape will look like.
Yeah, and I think Alex Pereira's best move would be to pair himself up, if he's willing to fight this year, by the end of this year, with Josh Hokit. There's nobody climbing the ranks in their division as fast as Josh Hokit is right now, and there's nobody garnering more attention than Josh Hokit. So it's likely to say, and it's fair to say, that Josh Hokit will get a world title shot if he wins one more fight. And if Alex Pereira can go spoil that party for him, then he gets another shot at triple champ opportunities. And he could be not only the first person to get a triple champ opportunity, but the second person as well. And Alex Pereira's a star. They understand that. They've paid him a whole lot of money to get in that cage and fight.
10 mil a fight, from what I've heard.
And he's such a star, a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. Don't give us any reasons to dislike you. Like, we're upset about the loss, just like you're upset about the loss. We don't want to see the illegal strikes, just like you don't want to feel the illegal strikes. But at the end of the day, it's all been settled. It's all done. You're not going to appeal it. So let's move forward in the best way possible and adjust and adapt to the situation at hand. And I do believe if Alex Pereira can win one more fight, he will get another triple champ opportunity. And that's exactly what the UFC wants for him and what they need at heavyweight.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to pin that one.
Thanks.
And Diego Lopes, 155. He wants to move up there, and he wants to get a fight within the month, he said. That's what we love about Diego Lopes. Now, the initial thought that came to mind to me, and you can let me know if you agree or disagree with this. He said, I'll fight at 45 or 55. He said, I'm never a guy to say no.
Right.
If they say, hey, we got a fight for you, and this is the guy, and this is the date, I say yes, and then I look at the contract later. You know what I mean? It's like,
it could be Volk for the third time.
He would love that, right?
Yeah.
That would be a dream come true. But I think Diego also realizes, and he said in many interviews candidly, I'm not going to fight Volk again. Volk beat me handily twice.
Right.
I get it. And that's why I think why he's got his sights on 155. So when I heard him say that, first thought that popped into my mind, Charles Oliveira for the BMF belt. Now, Charles Oliveira has a real claim that he should be next to fight Justin Gaethje for the undisputed title, and there could be a unification. But Conor McGregor said it in his interview as well. I don't think that the UFC is trying to do any favors for Charles because of what happened with the BMF. And if the UFC could figure out a way to get the BMF belt off of Charles Oliveira, they will do it at this point in time. I believe that. Now, why does Diego Lopes factor into that? Well, Diego Lopes is extremely good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways he can negate those grappling initiatives of Charles Oliveira. You know, Charles is good with takedowns, but he really works the back takes and the body locks in there, and he kind of, can hold there.
Right.
And when a fight, Diego Lopes is not one you're going to keep down. It's hard to take his back.
He's great in the scramble.
Great in the scramble. So I think he can force the type of fight out of Charles for the BMF belt that the UFC kind of wants and what the intention of the BMF belt is. I don't think anybody could disagree at this point that Diego Lopes, when you look at the list of people who are BMF worthy, like in other words, who should be fighting for a BMF belt, that Diego Lopes would not be on that list. So what do you think of that fight? I know they're talking Arman potentially for the BMF belt. That's a huge fight. I know they're talking Charles versus, or at least Charles is talking him versus Justin Gaethje. But I love Diego at 155. I think his durability is going to be even better. I think his power is going to be even better. And he fights a lot, so he won't have to weight cut to 45 a bunch of times. As he gets older, that's going to get harder. So if he wants to keep the same schedule and fight as often as he does, a weight class change does make sense. Now, there's a lot of fun fights. You could do a Dan Hooker. You could do any number of things. But to me, the BMF belt just feels like a lot of fun. Lopes versus Oliveira, and we get the type of fight we want out of a BMF fight.
Yeah, Diego Lopes getting a shot at the BMF versus Charles Oliveira makes a whole lot of sense, especially for his, very first fight at 155 in the UFC. I think it'd be a lot of fun, and we've been saying on this channel for years that in a few years, Diego Lopes will become a BMF contender. We just have to kind of wait for this current list of BMFs to retire, and then obviously somebody's got to step in and take that throne. Now, I didn't realize it would be so soon, but Diego Lopes says yes to everything. He's an entertaining fights every single time he's in the cage. He does good things for the UFC, and they always do good things for him. So if he's able to get on the rarest card in the Freedom 250 card, which only had 14 people fighting on it, I also think he could wind up getting a BMF title. And the reason I think there are some real legs to Diego Lopes moving up and getting a crack at the BMF title is because I don't think the UFC wants to tie BMF and Undisputed together, and that could be a bit risky. A lot of people think that Arman Tsarukyan versus Charles Oliveira for the BMF is next in line, and I'll just quickly say Arman Tsarukyan is a BMF. Now, people might go, oh, he's more of a wrestler and this and that and the other thing. Arman Tsarukyan will headbutt you if you get too close to him. He'll punch you at a wrestling match if you piss him off. He'll throw Uriah Faber off of a wrestling mat. He'll do whatever it takes to make sure he gets his hand raised and make sure that he leaves a lasting impression with the fans. He's a viral machine, and I think he's a little bit short-tempered. He's got a short fuse, but that's kind of also in line with the BMFs. But I also think Arman Tsarukyan has a real chance of becoming world champion. And like I was saying, tying BMF and Undisputed together makes things messy. We don't need one world title fight that winds up getting a guy 2 belts. This isn't boxing. So I think it's actually better for Charles Oliveira, who's already been the world champion, and he's, of course, a great contender at 155, to fight another guy who isn't in line for a title. Maybe he'll get there, but just somebody who will make for an interesting fight, somebody that they could put on the top of a bill to main event a 5-round fight that isn't a world title fight. It's a BMF. And Diego Lopes versus Charles Oliveira absolutely fits that, bill to a T. If they said tomorrow that sometime later this year, we've got Charles Oliveira versus Diego Lopes for the BMF title, nobody would be like, Diego Lopes isn't a BMF. They'd be like, nah, they got the right guy.
And he's going to force the type of fight out of Charles that we want to see out of Charles.
Right. Now, if Charles gets out there and just manhandles Diego Lopes the way he did Max Holloway, we start to realize, okay, maybe Charles Oliveira is not only a BMF, but also still the best 155er in the world. Let's get him another title shot. But for the time being, with Justin taking at least the rest of this year off, Arman Tsarukyan being the number 1 contender, and then Max Holloway and Conor McGregor both fighting at 170, but still having real implications at 155. And I think because the champion Justin Gaethje's done so much for the sport, they'd be willing to scratch his back a little bit and say, you don't need to fight the generation of tomorrow. We'll let you have a little bit fun and fight the winner of Max Holloway versus Conor McGregor. Obviously, you want to get your lick back on Max Holloway for the way he did you at the BMF title fight, and Conor McGregor's the biggest fight in the sport. And people have been saying for a decade now that Justin Gaethje versus Conor McGregor would be a barn burner, stylistically a perfect matchup and a lot of fun. So I think Justin Gaethje should get that. I also think that Arman Tsarukyan should be kind of considered for an Undisputed, and that sort of leaves Charles Oliveira holding his BMF, waiting for somebody that is also BMF material. Insert Diego Lopes. That's your perfect guy. I think that's a great match.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's a whole gamut of fun matches you could make for him if it's not tried. Think like a Quillian Sawkill versus Diego Lopes.
Yeah, he's right there on the cusp of becoming a BMF.
And there's just, Dan Hooker, I said that in the beginning, but I have
fallen
to
off a little
look
bit.
at the rankings. There's some new ones that came out, and that's actually a perfect segue into the next topic of the day. I wrote them down because there was just too many big names to remember all of them, and I don't want to miss. So Robert Whittaker, Cheeto Vera, Peyton Talbot, Raul Rosas Jr., Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega, Josh Emmett, Fazeev, Beneil Dariush, Derek Lewis, Jessica Andrade, Misha Tate. those are all big name fighters.
Misha Tate's still in the rankings.
Well, that's so.
I guess not anymore.
Not anymore. She's not. I want to kind of parcel this out a little bit, right? Because when I see a Derek Lewis,
right,
or for example, a Yair Rodriguez, those two guys were taken out for different reasons, right? Derek Lewis is not inactive. Derek Lewis fights a lot.
He fought on the last big card.
Yeah, the problem is Derek Lewis has not looked good lately, and so they're putting more. It's more of a "what have you done for me lately" type of thing, which I like. Yeah. I'm a fan of "what have you done for me lately" when it comes to the UFC rankings. So he's shown up the last couple of times. He's been finished. The fights weren't really that competitive, so they're factoring in. Did you get finished? Did you finish somebody? How did you look in the fight? Who was the opponent that you fought? So it seems like it's starting to make a little bit more sense. Then you look at like a Yair Rodriguez, a Brian Ortega, a Misha Tate, a Chito Vera, and you think, okay, these people have not been super active.
Right.
And I think Chito's got a fight booked. But aside from that, Yair Rodriguez is the perfect one that comes to mind. If you think of the last 5 years, he's got damn near Zabit's activity level in the UFC, and Zabit's been retired. So
he's been off in medical school or wherever he is.
It's not been pretty for Yair as far as activity is concerned. So you understand why those people are taken off.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm getting this AI system. I'm actually agreeing with a lot of it. And then I see like Peyton Talbot comes off and Chiwewe comes off. And I'm like, okay, Rosas Jr., maybe they're thinking strength of schedule.
That's fair.
But Peyton beat a former champion in Henry Cejudo.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of flabbergasted by that one. I wonder if they'll get things right, if they'll kind of right the ship as we go forward. But overall thoughts on the new AI rankings. I mean, Robert Whitaker is another one, but I think he's talking about a weight class move, so maybe that factors into it.
Yeah.
What are your overall, shock value, immediate reaction to what we saw with the way AI shook up the rankings?
Yeah, so the UFC moving into AI rankings is obviously going to come with growing pains. And I think that they made a couple errors, or they will probably retrack some of these things and give us a different set of rankings by even this time next week. But it feels to me like consistency in your schedule is very important to them. Strength of schedule, very important. And that those two things are not abnormal for sports to consider for ranking. I mean, just look at the NCAA. That's kind of how they always did it, right? You could have an undefeated 15-0 record in college football, or 14-0 or whatever it is. But if you played in some division that doesn't have any good teams, you're not playing in the Super Bowl equivalent, the NCAA championships.
You may be like, let's say, for example, you may be behind Alabama, who's like 12-1.
Right.
Or
if Brigham Young University or some college like that has an undefeated record and Alabama suffered 2 losses, there's still a good chance that Alabama winds up getting that world title shot, because it's a little bit different. And if they lost to Louisiana, who also makes it to the playoffs, and they lost to Georgia, who also makes it to the playoffs, then you're like, okay, well, we clearly know who the best teams are. And even though this team's undefeated, they didn't quite have the same run. So I kind of get that. And it might also add a little bit of urgency for fighters to not want to, grow too slowly in the division. Now,
that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping this ranking thing makes the Yair Rodriguez's of the world be like, man, I can't just rest on my laurels and sit and wait, for years for a marketable and
maintain a ranking
matchup and maintain a ranking,
just like Colby Covington did. I think he was in the top 5 for like several years and had like 1 or 2 fights during that time. So, but also it does sort of make things interesting for the guys that take the Sugar Sean O'Malley route, and that's not because he was hand selecting his opponents. The UFC was saying, look, we trust that you're a star, we trust that you've got skills, but we're not willing to put you all the way up into the top yet. Now, once he got into the rankings and he got like the number 12 or number 11 ranking, of course he wound up jumping all the way to number 1, fought Peter Yan, and then the rest is history, comes with a belt and all of that. But that sort of path in the UFC may be one that guys are trying to avoid now, because they're like, I want to get into the rankings, so give me the hardest fights you can possibly give me. That way I can make my leaps and bounds in the division. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Yes, you want to climb the rankings fast, but you don't want to do it too fast. And you also don't want to have a bunch of great fights that wind up not getting you a number next to your name, because then it's, people don't really see you as a ranked top contender. So it's weird, but I do think it's going to push fighters fighters to be a little bit more consistent, to not cherry pick fights, and then ultimately look for ways that they can climb in the division through strength of schedule, aligning themselves with the right opponents. Comes back to that thing we were talking about 20, 30 minutes ago of calling your shots when the announcer that talks to you after the fight says, who do you want to fight next? Maybe you can pick somebody who stylistically may match up well with you and you think you could beat them, but also would be considered difficult in the strength of schedule department.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So,
and sorry for fucking up all the football analogy. I haven't been watching football lately, so I keep saying like world title.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's what I love about us. We even in another sports reference, we use things like punch, kick, world title fights.
Well, like the University of Alabama should be getting the belt pretty soon, I think, or whatever.
We're diehard. We're through and through, right?
Yeah.
And as a diehard, if you're a diehard, there's no way you don't love Dustin the Diamond Poirier.
Yeah.
So that's the last topic of the day. Unfortunately, ending on a bit of a depressing note.
We can make it happy, though.
Let me just start by saying I love Dustin Poirier.
Yes.
Dustin Poirier has been one of my favorite fighters for a long time.
Yep.
And what I love about Dustin is he obviously the body cam footage was bad. Right? You know, some of the things he said, the way he was acting aggressively towards the police officer, it was bad.
Yeah.
Dustin is also aware of that. He came right out and he was like, look, I need some help. I'm seeking help. It's not been easy for him. This is nothing new, right? If you listen to the podcast that Dustin has been on, Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan immediately post-retirement, he said, I'm having a little bit of a difficult time adjusting to not having a fight camp. And if you think about it, when Dustin met his wife, Jolie, he was training to be a professional mixed martial arts fighter. So his whole relationship with his wife, his whole time as a father, his whole adult life,
his identity
has been that he's a UFC fighter. And not just that, he's one of the most famous ones on the planet.
Right.
One of the most highly paid.
Right.
And so now he's kind of in a weird situation where he probably, I don't know how much money Dustin's worth, but it's safe to say that he's worth somewhere north of $10 million, which would put him in the category of never having to worry about work again in his life.
Right.
Especially when you live in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's not...
And you got a hot sauce that's going to pay your bills as you go.
And you know, people will pay you for, you know, showing up to events and endorsements.
Sure.
He could sit down and do what we've been doing for 6 years and in one day have double the subscriber base that we have.
That's and deserve every bit of it.
That's how this world works.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a lot of things that he can do. The problem is getting himself in the right paths and the right lanes to do them. And I got nothing to say other than I just really am glad that Dustin is not oblivious to the problems in his life, because Conor McGregor for a long time, I think, was.
Yeah.
You know, Conor, it was very optically apparent on camera, and I'm not going to get into the substances. Conor was doing some stuff.
Yeah.
You know, when he has been on this hiatus, you know, post becoming mega famous and mega rich.
Proper 12 Irish whiskey, Black Forge Irish Stout, and whatever.
And some other stuff.
Yeah, and whatever mixes well with that.
Yeah, or doesn't
mix well with that.
And, you know, and so Dustin Poirier, and I don't think that Dustin, from just the appearance that he's into that stuff. No. It seems like he's got an issue with alcohol. And his father, he said, my father ruined his life with alcohol. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. I'm never going to come on this channel and kick a guy when he's down.
No.
I'm happy that he recognizes the problem. I do hope that he does get the help that he deserves. And I don't think that competition is a bad thing for Dustin Poirier. Now, the UFC's got, you know, UFC BJJ. Gilbert Burns just transitioned to that and looked great in his first fight. There's, you know, Misfits Boxing. There's, if he wants to come back to the UFC, he could come back and do that. But there's RAF, and I know Dustin's not a wrestling pedigree type of guy, but I just suffice it to say there's a number of competition things that Dustin could do to occupy his mind and occupy his time.
Yeah.
But you know, and if that's going to help him get a handle on the drinking, I think that's definitely what he should do. He's in that level where he mentioned his father having a problem. He clearly has an issue. It's a hard line to draw, but it is kind of like there is no gray area there. Like, he does need to stop drinking completely. And that's a hard thing to do. There's no like, yeah, I can, you know, I'll quit whiskey, but I'm going to have a beer. That just never tends to go well.
It's a slippery slope.
And I hope that Dustin Poirier can just draw a line in the sand, accept sobriety, and realize that in doing so, he's going to change the lives of a lot of people that are big fans of his. To use him as an example, to see him on his path to sobriety, I'm here for it. You know, shamelessly, I would love the opportunity to sit down with Dustin one day and interview him. We're not to that level yet where he would owe us anything, but
he's not too far away. If he's in Lafayette, we're in Houston, and we could make the drive to him, or vice versa.
I hope we get there someday. But your thoughts on the whole situation, the body cam footage, and Poirier's situation as a whole?
Yeah, the safest place for Dustin Poirier right now is inside the UFC's cage. I know that sounds crazy. He retired, but how many times have we seen guys retire and then come back because they still have to scratch that itch? And a lot of guys that say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I think that I need to move along from the fighting aspect of my career. They wind up finding that vice or finding that itch to scratch in a different way. And I don't want to say that he's addicted to alcohol, right? I don't think he's an alcoholic, but I think that he has an addictive gene and an addictive personality. And that is very common in MMA. It's very common in all sports. If you want to be the best in the world at something, you have to be obsessive, addicted to it. You have to literally spend all your time and effort on that sport. And when you take yourself out of that and you're literally quitting cold turkey. That's what he did with fighting. He was fighting, and then now he's not fighting. And he's been real candid, real honest with us. And many times in interviews, people have said, how are you adjusting to retirement life? And he goes, I'll be honest, not a day goes by where I don't think about fighting, where I feel like I'm, missing out on something, where I watch the fights and then, maybe I'll shadow box a little bit because I just feel like I need to be in there. So I totally get where Dustin's coming from. I understand that addiction is difficult for people, and it's not just like vices and substances that people get addicted to. The same thing that made him the successful fan favorite fighter was being addicted to fighting.
Perfection of the game, perfection of his craft. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that Dustin Poirier right now may need to reassess, and the best way to sort of kickstart his sobriety would be, let's get back into a fight camp, because I can't be drinking if I got to show up every morning at the gym, and every night I got to finish my night doing rounds as well. So I think that he needs to call Dia Davis. He needs to call the boys, Mike Brown, get everybody ready, rally the troops. Let's go again. It doesn't have to be for world titles. It doesn't have to be for BMFs. Let's not worry about cutting huge down to 155 again. Let's go up to 170. Let's have a little bit of fun. This is more do this for Dustin because he deserves it, not I just want to get back in. I want to prove I'm the best in the world again. Let's just give Dustin a safe place where he can wind himself down out of the fighting world full time and into retirement, because quitting cold turkey like that is obviously difficult for him and many other fighters before him. And I guarantee you we'll see this story come out more and more as more guys retire and find a hard time getting their footing in life after fighting.
Yeah, for sure. And also he would have to have a prolonged fight camp, because he said very candidly he would not pass a UFC drug screening right now as far as like supplementation. So he would actually have to, get himself together for a minimum of 6 months, and just and I think that wouldn't be a bad thing, honestly.
Right. And I think there's other avenues he could even go have some fun. I don't think RAF is super strenuous on how they're testing people.
No,
like some of these wrestlers that have been coming from wherever they're coming from, they're juiced to the gills. So he could have a little bit of fun, wean himself off, find a 170 frame that fits him. And I think there'd be a couple of fun fights. I'll throw one out there, even though this man just retired as well. Colby Covington versus Dustin Poirier. Bring them both back. Let them get in there and shake it up sometime in 2027.
That sounds like a plan to me, and I think that's a perfect place to leave this conversation. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. If you have not already, and if you feel like we earned it today, really smash that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and it helps Nick and I out tremendously. Leave a comment on this video. Nick and I get back to as many of them as we possibly can. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
Peace.